The world of FOYLE'S war was built on restraint, intelligence, and consequence. But when the cameras stopped, a far harsher battle began. From broken marriages and sudden accidents to unexplained deaths, the cast faced lives marked by quiet tragedy. And once you uncover the truth, you'll understand the true cost behind the silence. Michael Kitchen, as Christopher Foyle. Christopher Foyle, the principled investigator at the center of FOYLE'S war, was played by Michael Kitchen. At 54 years old, he embodied a man shaped by restraint, patience, and moral clarity. His performance relied on stillness rather than dominance, allowing silence to speak louder than authority. That quiet authority did not emerge by accident, and it traces back much earlier. Born on October 31st, 1948, in Leicester, England, Michael Roy Kitchen grew up in a middle-class household defined by structure and expectation. His childhood was marked by academic pressure and social withdrawal, leaving him emotionally reserved and deeply self-critical. Those early tensions later surfaced in controlled inward performances such as Out of Africa. Those traits followed him into adulthood and shaped the early years of his career. Kitchen endured repeated rejections, unstable income, and years of uncertainty that forced him to take secondary work simply to survive. Financial stress accumulated, feeding long-term anxiety and exhaustion that he rarely discussed publicly. His marriage to Rowena Miller in 1988 brought stability, but heavy workloads and emotional distance introduced recurring strain, creating a relationship sustained through endurance rather than ease. Professionally, Kitchen resisted visibility and chose precision. His BAFTA-nominated performance in To Play the King demonstrated how authority could be conveyed through pause rather than force, reinforcing his reputation for intellectual control. That discipline found its fullest expression in FOYLE'S war, where his performance shaped the series' ethical gravity and emotional restraint. The role did not elevate him into celebrity, but it cemented trust. Today, Michael Kitchen is 78 years old. He remains in England, living privately and accepting only carefully selected work. With an estimated net worth of $8 million, his career reflects longevity rather than excess. His legacy endures through absence as much as presence. A life spent mastering silence. Honeysuckle Weeks as Samantha Stewart. Samantha Stewart, the emotional counterbalance within FOYLE'S war, was portrayed by Honeysuckle Weeks. At 23 years old, she brought urgency, warmth, and movement into a world ruled by caution and restraint. Her character became the human pulse beneath the series' moral gravity. That sensitivity was forged long before the cameras rolled. Born on August 1st, 1979, in Cardiff, Wales, Honeysuckle Susan Weeks grew up amid instability following her parents' early divorce. Frequent moves and fractured routines disrupted her emotional foundation during childhood. Early roles in television dramas like Goggle Eyes hinted at promise, but they also placed her under expectations she was not emotionally prepared to carry. Early professional exposure did not bring security. Casting rejections accumulated, and the pressure to meet expectations pushed her into depression. Marriage to Lorne Stormont Darling in 2007 initially offered structure, but unresolved addiction issues and emotional volatility strained the relationship. The crisis became public in 2016 when she was reported missing before being found safe, an event that revealed years of private struggle. The marriage ended in 2019, leaving lasting emotional consequences. Her career continued in fragments rather than momentum. Appearances in The Five and the Crown briefly returned her to critical attention, serving as reminders of the talent that had never disappeared. Yet stability remained elusive, as bipolar disorder and alcoholism led to repeated treatment and long absences from acting. Recovery replaced ambition, and survival replaced momentum. Now, Honeysuckle Weeks is 47 years old. She continues to work selectively in British theatre and television, prioritizing health over exposure. Her estimated net worth of $3 million reflects early success interrupted by illness and recovery. Her story lingers not as a comeback, but as a quiet record of endurance marked by loss and persistence. Anthony Howell as Paul Milner. Paul Milner, the wounded former soldier navigating duty and damage in FOYLE'S War, was played by Anthony Howell. At 31 years old, he shaped Milner as a man held together by resolve rather than strength. The character's limp was visible, but the heavier injury lived underneath. That inner tension has roots that run deep. Born on June 27, 1971, in England's Lake District, Anthony Matthew Howell was raised in a working-class household where money was tight and opportunity uneven. School brought pressure instead of reassurance, and constant comparison bred self-doubt that turned him inward. That quiet vulnerability would later surface in restrained performances such as Wives and Daughters, where emotion was suggested rather than declared. As adulthood arrived, uncertainty followed. Moving from theater into television proved unstable, with long gaps between jobs and mounting financial stress that tested his confidence. Howell married his first wife in the early years of his career, but the relationship deteriorated under clashing schedules and emotional distance, ending after 10 years. He later built a life with a second partner, yet even that stability required negotiation, particularly around parenting and time. Those personal pressures filtered naturally into his work. He remained loyal to the stage while television roles accumulated steadily, including Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, where restraint again outweighed spectacle. Again and again, Howell gravitated toward characters carrying unseen damage, and FOYLE'S War became the clearest reflection of that instinct. Milner's perseverance felt authentic because it echoed lived experience. Today, Anthony Howell is 55 years old. He continues to work across British theater and television, choosing substance over exposure. With an estimated net worth of $4 million, built through acting and property investment, his career reflects survival rather than speed. His legacy rests in endurance shaped by quiet discipline. Julian Ovenden as Andrew Foyle. Andrew Foyle, the son caught between family loyalty and the moral fallout of war in FOYLE'S War, was portrayed by Julian Ovenden. At 26 years old, he brought youthful unease and restrained emotion into the narrative. Through him, the cost of war entered the home rather than the battlefield. That intensity did not emerge by chance. Born on November 29, 1976, in Sheffield, England, Julian Mark. Ovenden grew up under strict expectation, guided by rigorous musical training. Discipline replaced spontaneity, and success came tied to pressure. Those conditions later echoed in demanding stage work that sharpened control but taxed endurance. As his career expanded, personal strain followed close behind. Ovenden married Kate Royal in 2010, and together they raised 2 children, but constant travel and overlapping commitments repeatedly tested the marriage. Time away from home became a recurring source of conflict. When vocal strain led to surgery, he was forced to confront the physical cost of ambition and the limits of discipline. That reckoning refined his choices. Performances in Downton Abbey and later Bridgerton displayed composure shaped by musical precision, while theater work earned him an Olivier Award nomination, confirming depth beyond screen visibility. Each role carried the mark of control learned under pressure, turning constraint into clarity. Today, Julian Ovenden is 50 years old. He continues to combine acting with an international music career, performing and recording selectively. With an estimated net worth of $5 million, drawn from television, film, and concert work, his life reflects disciplined longevity. His journey stands as proof that mastery is often paid for long before it is recognized. Ellie Haddington as Hilda Pierce. Hilda Pierce, the sharp-eyed intelligence officer moving quietly through FOYLE'S War, was played by Ellie Haddington. At 47 years old, she brought controlled authority and moral ambiguity into a world ruled by secrecy. That restraint was learned early. Born on February 17, 1955, in Aberdeen, Scotland, Ellie Haddington grew up in a working-class family burdened by financial hardship and limited access to education. Opportunity was scarce, and ambition had to be defended rather than encouraged. Theater became both refuge and risk, a pattern later echoed in complex roles such as Doctor Who. As her career unfolded, resistance followed. Early casting confined her to secondary roles, while gender bias slowed advancement and delayed recognition. Haddington married in her younger years, but the relationship gradually collapsed under emotional strain and professional frustration, ending in divorce and a long period of solitude. During this time, she struggled with depression, a private battle that sharpened her empathy while quietly draining her strength. With time, experience replaced momentum. Work in Spies of Warsaw and later Enola Holmes reflected a career sustained by trust rather than breakthrough fame. Authority roles became her terrain, shaped by lived endurance rather than polish. In FOYLE'S War, that history lent gravity to every measured decision Hilda Pierce made. In 2026, Ellie Haddington is 71 years old. She continues to work steadily in British television and film, avoiding publicity while remaining quietly indispensable. With an estimated net worth of $2 million, her career reflects persistence rather than reward. Her legacy rests in survival. Corin Redgrave as ACC Rose, the rigid face of institutional authority in FOYLE'S War, was portrayed by Corin Redgrave. At 64 years old, he brought weight, severity, and moral inflexibility to the role. His presence suggested power rooted in systems rather than sympathy. That burden began at birth. Born on July 16, 1939 in Marylebone, London, Corin William Redgrave was raised inside Britain's most famous acting dynasty, the son of Michael Redgrave and Rachel Kempson. Talent surrounded him, but so did expectation, comparison, and rivalry with sisters Vanessa and Lynn Redgrave. Early success in films like A Man for All Seasons never silenced the internal pressure to measure up. As adulthood took hold, belief complicated survival. Redgrave's outspoken left-wing politics narrowed opportunities and slowed his ascent, leaving him professionally isolated for long stretches. His first marriage to Deirdre Hamilton Hill ended in divorce after years of emotional strain, and later marriage to Kika Markham was shaped by illness, activism, and exhaustion. Alongside political marginalization, he endured severe mental illness and a prostate cancer diagnosis that steadily eroded his health. Late recognition arrived with consequence. Performances in the Forsyte Saga and Olivier-winning stage work finally affirmed his depth beyond lineage. A major heart attack in 2005 nearly ended his career, and subsequent returns to the stage carried the weight of mortality rather than ambition. His final performances felt heavier, shaped by loss rather than hope. Sadly, Corin Redgrave died on April 6, 2010, at the age of 70, from complications related to prostate cancer, passing away in a London hospital. He was laid to rest at Highgate Cemetery, among figures of lasting cultural significance. With an estimated net worth of $3 million, his life closed without triumph, defined instead by endurance. His story remains one of belief carried to the edge and a legacy lived under unbearable weight. J. Benedict as Captain. John Kiefer. Captain John Kiefer, the American officer operating within Britain's fragile wartime alliances in FOYLE'S War, was played by J. Benedict. At 55 years old, he gave the role a sense of displacement, a man always standing slightly outside the room. His authority felt borrowed, never fully at ease. That sense of not belonging began early. Born on April 11, 1951 in Burbank, California, J. Benedict moved with his family from the United States to Europe during childhood, eventually settling in England. The cultural shift left him suspended between identities, fluent in languages but never fully rooted. This outsider perspective later surfaced naturally in roles such as aliens. Adulthood brought persistence rather than security. Benedict built a career almost entirely from supporting roles, often cast as Americans in British productions, which kept him employed but rarely stable. Financial uncertainty was a constant undercurrent. He married Vanessa Pereira, with whom he had a daughter, before that marriage ended in divorce. Later, he married actress Phoebe Schofield, and together they faced the pressures of freelance work, translation projects, and raising children within an unpredictable industry. Those pressures never stopped him from working. Benedict appeared steadily across television and film, including Emmerdale and later The Dark Knight Rises. In FOYLE'S War, Captain Kiefer's measured presence reflected a life spent adapting, enduring, and recalibrating. The role felt lived in, not performed. Sadly, J. Benedict died on April 4, 2020, at the age of 68, from complications related to COVID-19, passing away in hospital in London just days before his 69th birthday. His estimated net worth of $2 million reflected decades of work without the protection of stardom. He left behind his wife Phoebe Schofield and his children, his career ending quietly amid a global crisis that mirrored the instability he had lived with all along. Tim Pigott-Smith as Brigadier Timothy Wilson. Brigadier Timothy Wilson, the embodiment of military discipline and institutional control in FOYLE'S War, was portrayed by Tim Pigott-Smith. At 64 years old, he brought severity shaped by command rather than cruelty. His authority felt absolute, yet burdened. That rigidity was shaped from childhood. Born on May 13, 1946, in Rugby, England, Timothy Peter Pigott-Smith was raised in a household marked by structure and expectation, influenced by his father's journalistic discipline. Education emphasized order and achievement, leaving little room for softness. Years later, his breakthrough in The Jewel in the Crown would reveal how deeply he understood controlled menace, earning him a BAFTA and defining public perception. As his reputation grew, so did the cost. Pigott-Smith became strongly associated with antagonistic authority figures, a typecasting that limited range even as it guaranteed work. His marriage to actress Pamela Miles endured strain from relentless schedules and long separations, eventually ending in divorce before they later reconciled. Personal tension followed him alongside professional success, never fully resolved. Yet his craft deepened with time. Appearances in Gangs of New York and V for Vendetta carried the same controlled intensity, while later stage work earned Olivier and Tony nominations for King Charles III. Even after a demanding career, he continued working relentlessly, rehearsing new roles rather than slowing down. Sadly, Tim Pigott-Smith died suddenly on April 7, 2017, at the age of 70, from a heart attack while preparing for a stage production in Northampton. He was buried at Highgate Cemetery, East Side, among Britain's cultural figures. With an estimated net worth of $4 million, his life ended not in retirement, but in motion. His legacy remains that of a man who carried authority to the very end, never stepping out of uniform. Ronald Pickup as Sir Giles Messenger. Sir Giles Messenger, the polished civil servant whose influence moved quietly through FOYLE'S War, was played by Ronald Pickup. At 64 years old, he embodied a man whose authority rested on language, etiquette, and timing rather than command. Every appearance felt measured, as if power itself preferred not to raise its voice. That restraint was shaped early. Born on June 7, 1940, in Chester, England, Ronald Alfred Pickup grew up in the shadow of post-war Britain, where scarcity lingered and certainty was rare. Childhood was marked by disruption and emotional caution, leaving him observant rather than outspoken. Those instincts later surfaced in reflective performances, such as The Life of Verdi. As adulthood unfolded, recognition came slowly. Pickup spent years in secondary roles, respected but rarely foregrounded, learning patience the hard way. He married Lance Travers in 1964, and together they raised 2 children. But family life was marked by early loss and long periods of emotional strain as work kept him away. Personal grief shaped a quiet melancholy that never fully left him. With time, trust replaced visibility. Roles in The Crown and the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel revealed how decades of discipline had refined his craft, allowing subtlety to eclipse spectacle. These performances carried the calm authority of someone who had endured invisibility without bitterness. Each late career success felt less like a breakthrough than a recognition long overdue. Sadly, Ronald Pickup died on February 24, 2021, at the age of 80, following a long illness associated with advanced age. His estimated net worth of $3 million reflected a lifetime of steady work rather than stardom. He left behind a career defined by endurance, closing quietly after decades of service to stage and screen. Keith Barron, as David Barrett. David Barrett, the aging figure whose presence hinted at decline and consequence in FOYLE'S War, was portrayed by Keith Barron. At 72 years old, he brought weariness rather than authority to the role. His performance suggested a man already paying for earlier choices. That sense of erosion began long before the spotlight faded. Born on August 8, 1934, in Mexborough, England, Keith Barron grew up in poverty, where stability was fragile and ambition felt distant. Early hardship hardened him, but it also left lingering insecurity that followed him into adulthood. Later success in television comedy, particularly Duty-Free, masked a lifetime shaped by restraint. As years passed, momentum slowed. Roles became fewer, and the industry's focus shifted away from aging faces. Barron's personal life reflected similar turbulence. His first marriage ended in divorce, and a later remarriage brought its own tensions as health declined and work diminished. Emotional fatigue accumulated alongside physical illness. Keith Barron died on November 15, 2017, at the age of 83, after a prolonged illness. His estimated net worth of $2 million marked a long career that outlasted relevance but not resilience. His story closed not with applause but with quiet persistence, remembered by those who watched closely. Rupert Vansittart, as Sir Alec Meyerson. Sir Alec Meyerson, the immaculately dressed authority figure operating behind closed doors in FOYLE'S War, was played by Rupert Vansittart. At 55 years old, he embodied control through tone rather than force. The role carried the chill of influence exercised without explanation. That restraint grew from pressure rather than privilege. Born on February 10, 1958, in Cranley, England, Rupert Nicholas Vansittart was raised in a solid middle-class household where academic expectations weighed heavily. School years were defined by comparison and performance, leaving little room for ease. Training at the Central School of Speech and Drama sharpened discipline, but reinforced a sense that identity came from approval, not instinct. As work accumulated, so did limitation. Vansittart's voice, posture, and bearing made him valuable but predictable, drawing him into decades of typecasting as aristocrats, politicians, and bureaucrats. Recognition came with roles in 4 Weddings and A Funeral and Braveheart, yet variety remained elusive. His marriage to Emma Kate, daughter of actors Moray Watson and Pamela Marmont, endured publicly but fractured privately, ending in a bitter divorce that deepened isolation. Over time, authority became his currency. Performances in Game of Thrones as Lord Jon Royce and in The Remains of the Day demonstrated how repetition had refined rather than diminished him. The characters felt heavy with history, shaped by someone who understood constraint intimately. Each role carried the residue of a career spent inside narrow boundaries. Today, Rupert Vansittart is 68 years old. He remains active across British television and theater, continuing to inhabit figures of power with deliberate precision. With an estimated net worth of $3 million, his life reflects durability shaped by pressure, a career built not on reinvention, but on endurance. Jeremy Swift as Glenville Harris. Glenville Harris, the political operator whose genial surface concealed calculation in FOYLE'S War, was portrayed by Jeremy Swift. At 53 years old, he infused the role with nervous intelligence and quiet opportunism. The performance suggested a man constantly negotiating survival. That tension originated early. Born on June 27, 1960, in Stockton-on-Tees, England, Jeremy Paul Swift grew up in a working-class household marked by financial uncertainty. Instability shaped his childhood, fostering both ambition and escape. Theater became refuge, yet the insecurity never fully loosened its grip. Adulthood brought excess alongside opportunity. Early career momentum collided with addiction, particularly alcohol, which disrupted work and contributed to the collapse of his first marriage. Recovery was uneven, and public silence concealed private struggle. Even as he rebuilt stability, the cost lingered in fractured relationships and lingering self-doubt. Gradually, control replaced chaos. Roles in Gosford Park and Mary Poppins Returns restored trust, while Ted Lasso transformed his public image, earning an Emmy nomination and validating years of persistence. The warmth he projected on screen contrasted sharply with the effort required to maintain balance off it. Today, Jeremy Swift is 66 years old. He continues working steadily in television, film, and music, grounded by his marriage to Mary Roscoe and their 2 adopted children. With an estimated net worth of $4 million, his story endures as one of recovery rather than escape, a life rebuilt after damage, still carrying its weight. David Horovitch as Thomas Kramer. Thomas Kramer, the cautious figure navigating consequence and compromise in FOYLE'S War, was played by David Horovitch. At 57 years old, he brought restraint rather than force to the role. The performance leaned on watchfulness, suggesting a man shaped by loss and calculation. Born August 11, 1945, in London, David Clement John Horovitch grew up in post-war austerity, where scarcity sharpened sensitivity. His father, Morris Horovitch, worked in childcare. His mother, Alice, was a teacher. Stability existed, but comfort did not. Educated away from home and trained at the Central School of Speech and Drama, he learned early that control could be quieter than confidence. Adulthood brought fracture alongside craft. Horovitch married Jane Elizabeth Gwynne Roberts in 1967. The marriage ended in divorce in 1985, followed by further personal ruptures that deepened isolation. The death of his son marked a permanent fault line, and depression followed, private grief that reframed his relationship to work and faith, including a late-life reckoning with his Jewish heritage. Work continued with gravity. Long-running turns as Inspector Slack in Miss Marple, and later as Grand Meister Mellos in House of the Dragon, showed a career refined by endurance. Film appearances, from Mr. Turner to The Nun 2, carried the same weight, authority tempered by sorrow rather than ego. Now, David Horovitch is 81 years old. He remains active, choosing selective screen and audio work, including literary recordings. With an estimated net worth of $2 million, his life reads as a testament to survival after loss, measured, ongoing, and quietly resilient. Hermione Gulliford as Elizabeth Addis. Elizabeth Addis, the composed professional whose resolve hid private strain in FOYLE'S War, was portrayed by Hermione Gulliford. At 44 years old, she grounded the character in steadiness rather than spectacle. The performance favored poise, letting silence do the work. Born February 15, 1971, in Somerset, Hermione Valentine Gulliford grew up with security but sustained artistic pressure. Training at the Central School of Speech and Drama honed discipline while intensifying competition. Early theater with the Royal Shakespeare Company set high standards, leaving little margin for ease. Careers built on craft invite comparison, and hers was no exception. Television opportunities arrived amid crowded casting pools, testing patience and confidence. Relationships bore that strain. A period of emotional turbulence preceded a settled family life with Alistair Graham, whom she married in 2000, raising 2 children while balancing demanding schedules. Her range broadened away from the war room frame. Stage work, from Romeo and Juliet at Shakespeare's Globe to national theater productions, kept her anchored in language and movement, while television roles such as Jane Eyre and long arcs on Holby City emphasized control under pressure. Each credit reinforced credibility earned, not assumed. In 2026, Hermione Gulliford is 55 years old. She continues to work across British television and theater, favoring character-led projects. With an estimated net worth of $1 million, her story lands on balance, craft sustained through competition, steadied by family, and carried forward without noise. Time changed the faces, but the silences, the scars, and the choices remained. Some of them found peace, some faded quietly, and some were lost far too soon. Which cast member's journey surprised you the most, and whose story hurt the hardest? If this look back moved you, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more untold stories behind the shows we thought we knew.